Thanks for joining us at Better Tech. I know you were with us for the last time. Just for the listeners, can you please introduce yourself?
Definitely. I'm really big fan of the show and excited to be here. So, how I got into design was a little bit of a twisting kind of trail. So, I started out in more on the computer science side of things. I thought I was going into kind of IT, and I started out kind of in that realm, really loving technology, loving to understand what could be done with computers and with technology in general.
All right. So, John, our today's topic is how product thinking helps for B2B startups, right? So this is something very new that product thinkings are moving towards, B2B. People are focusing on B2B products more than the past couple of years. So how you are envisioning it? So today we will be discussing around this topic.
Maybe for the rest of the audience, I'd like to know kind of more about your background, specifically in design, and yeah, kind of dig into that for a moment.
Yeah, sure. So basically, I'm a product designer. I have been in the industry from last almost 10 years, and I'm working as a user experience lead in Texel. So I have a team, and we are working on B2B and B2C products, but our focus is mainly on B2B. Depends upon, the industry need, right? So currently we are, getting more requests from clients regarding B2B than B2C.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that's great.
Right. So I think that we should start driving the conversation to, grab our listeners' interest into it. So what do you think? What's the current B2B landscape? How you see it as a, product designer?
Sure. Well, B2B is very interesting. We know it's a lot different in many ways, and it's similar in other ways to business to consumer. In the B2B world, we have to kind of target to specific decision makers when it comes to selling a product
Mhm.
and to getting users onboarded. Typically, those decision makers are like the heads of departments, sometimes HR, IT. Um, yeah, so that's one way that it's sort of different. Um, Usually, there's a stage of growth that you're kind of targeting as well, especially like a startup that's hit a certain amount of funding and they're ready to really scale up.
Mhm.
That's when you're usually targeting that service
Mhm.
at that specific other business. And then kind of the current setup is you usually have a longer engagement with multiple kind of an introduction, then maybe a product demo, then maybe bringing the stakeholders in and
Right.
trying to do the final
And
the final push.
stakeholders, like we when we are considering the consumer products, we have few stakeholders which are involved, like the main seniors of the company. But here in B2B, we need to involve few departments as well, right? If you are creating some product which is focusing HR and finance, so their leads are also involved in it. So this is kind of a platform where we can involve more stakeholders while considering a product when working in B2B, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really fantastic point. Um, and also thinking about maybe, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this as a UX, lead that's inside of a B2B organization. Um, do you see kind of a shift between the the traditional kind of onboarding sales where you have kind of a longer engagement versus kind of a freemium model, which I know is it's bigger in the B2C world, but certain organizations that do target businesses such as Slack, maybe MailChimp and others, they do have this freemium model of sales that's a
Yeah,
lot different. What do you think about that? Do you think that's a trend that's kind of going to take
yeah,
hold or?
yeah. I believe like I have been working in like pre-sales as well with my team and with the sales. So I believe that this premium model is going to last for a few years from now because the industry is shifting, right? The overall, remote working, which like bombard this year, and it seems like it will stay for long, right? For a few years. So it's a shift of the overall industry, and I believe that people when they are investing in, they are investing somewhere, they are more conscious about investing directly. They have fears. But if we are offering any, kind of a premium model, which this gives them confidence to invest actually. So this is kind of a thing. It's a step back, but it's eventually moving towards, like, we are pushing over clients and customers to the premium one, but to before, like, rather than directly digging, we are building their confidence. So this is how I
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah, just kind of stepping up that confidence ladder. Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what you think that, how, when you are thinking of a B2B product, how you can drive it? What do you think? How you evaluate the idea? If someone is coming to you, how you guide them?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's as a fellow designer, you can probably relate that it's a very complicated problem, right? Is how do you take these rough ideas that might be something great, they might be a diamond in the rough, they might be just a run-of-the-mill idea that doesn't have viability, and how do you kind of filter through those in a cost-effective and time-efficient way? And I think that's been, whether it's the birth of UX, trying to say, hey, just because we have a technology doesn't mean we have a customer who necessarily needs it or wants it in the way that we're
Yeah.
delivering it. And that was like kind of the birth of UX, and that was like a big, big movement. And then we had kind of product management and the business kind of taking some of that in and saying, okay, we can like digest some of that. And so there's like this democratization of data, and that went well in some ways and didn't go well in other ways. And so I think like what design thinking is trying to do, or when it comes to product thinking, it's a kind of a similar concept. How do we kind of go one layer up and forget about what everybody's job is, and how do we kind of have a rough mental framework to think about that process that you just described? And so I think that might be why that it's sort of catching fire at the moment.
And you know that this is where, the designers, product designers, plays their part, that they are getting a rough idea and they are aligning it with business, right? If someone is coming to you with a rough idea, they are not pretty sure that how much their idea is useful for their end users, and how it will work in the market, and what's the need. The gap is between the need, right? So they are not pretty sure about these things. So product designer, we are here to, help them, and guide them through the paths that, it's good that they have an idea, but they need to see its feasibility. They need to see how it will, enroll in the market, and how it will affect people's life, how it will make their life better, right? So eventually we are
Absolutely.
with a product, what we are doing, we are solving a problem, right? So we are here to, fill the gap that how this problem will be solved, right? So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. And so I think that's kind of where it's coming into play with exactly what you described. And it's kind of exciting. So this is a term that that was coined by this gentleman, Nike Blase, and
Mhm.
he's an interaction designer for Zing. So he kind of coined the term product thinking. And what it aims to do is exactly what you described. You have the users over here, you have the business over here, and a lot of times a common pitfall, and a reason that whether it's B2B or B2C, B2B has a little bit better track record. It's not actually as bad of a failure rate as what we've heard. It's closer to 60 and 50% respectively, and I think B2B has founders in B2B companies, usually it's not their first time around. So they have a little bit more maturity, where they started as B2C and they switched, it kind of transitioned over. They also usually have like more funding, so they have more runway.
Yeah.
But pretty much all startups, they fail because they run out of money, asterisks. And that asterisk is,
Yeah.
well, because they couldn't find product that they couldn't develop a product that users really wanted.
Yeah.
And so how do we think about pulling in the user wants X, and oops, we shifted and delivered Y, and so that there maybe even was
Yeah.
some user experience research at the beginning, but scope creep slipped in, and now we're shipping something that no longer matches up with what the market really is asking for. Yeah.
Yeah. I see it as like the, these days, we hear from our customers that they are looking for, they are more interested in UX research. They want to know about their users before, working on an actual product. They are interested in, exploring the industry, exploring the users, the capacity, and, the overall roadmap before diving into an idea. So I feel like that this is the time when UX research is very important for either it's a B2B product or B2C. Like product thinking involves the UX research because in this way you are exploring the market, you are exploring the business, and you are exploring your users for which you are going to solve a problem, right? So to keep on track, you need to have the research.
Absolutely. I think it's a step that, you can't skip really at this point in the game. So many companies are investing in user experience research. And if you are not, then you're really at a disadvantage. I think design, along with good engineering technology, of course, and product, management leadership, those are the keys, really. Those are like the secret sauce to kind of developing those future products. And so, product thinking makes it a little bit easier to think about because it breaks this whole process that we know of, in UX process, basically down into two spaces, the problem space and a solution space, which is really interesting because in thinking about this, like in previous companies have come up with like versions of this. I think as UX designers, you probably can relate with this, is like we're always trying to create a mental framework that works.
Yeah.
And every company is different. So it's always like, this is the process, but you might not get to do this entire process. You might only get to do a certain chunk. Maybe marketing takes some, maybe product management takes some.
Exactly.
So that's something you kind of have to roll with the punches on.
Yeah, exactly. So I read somewhere that there is no standardized UX process. Whatever process you are following, and if you are doing right in the market, it's your right process, right? And it could be different for me, it could be different for you, but eventually our process evolves around discovering the needs, then defining the problems, and then coming up with solutions. So eventually, all of us, all the product designers in the market, they are working in this way. It's like that we have some top and tricks that we use and add into our process.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're just kind of tasting, sampling,
Yeah,
and creating as we go along like a good cook, hopefully.
yeah, exactly. So, John,
Awesome.
what do you think about the product development and growth in for B2B startups as B2C are investing there, like in product development? What do you feel about it? That how B2B companies and startups need to invest in the products development?
Yeah, as far as like product development, when it comes to engineering, and I know this is like, even if we back up for a second, talk about in the design industry, there's this question of like, should designers code, right? And it's like, definitely yes, definitely no, maybe. And I think, we're moving into a world where rapid prototyping is really, really practically important. And the design tools are getting better, like Figma is really good. Protopie and Principle are really nice to kind of mock up what an app might look like. But at a certain point, the rubber meets the road and you've got to produce code. You got to produce working software. So I think that handoff space is something I'm really passionate about. I'm currently working on the design system, which I'm going to open source, like a certain essentials, like a fundamental part of that components, because I believe that it's so important to have a product designed and then that handoff process and all of the documentation and the communication around that can be aided, I think, by having something that reflects in a design program and also in code. So I'm really big on design systems. I think that's a huge technology leap. But then, practically what technology you need, I think needs to be further on in the process. One mistake that I've seen companies make sometimes or observed through stories is like kind of spiking and scaling your technology stack, your services before you really even know what problem you're solving. And so a lot of times there's dependencies between certain technology, whether it's we're choosing X language for the front end or the back end, or we're choosing this service, right? And sometimes when you get deep into the product, oh my gosh, this doesn't work together, but we've already bought this huge license that's multi-year contract. So And this is inception because like we're talking about B2B companies, but you're building a service for another company. So you're like experiencing their pain potentially if you build it wrong when
You
you're
need to be in
building it.
their
Yeah.
shoes, right?
Yes, exactly.
So
So it's
what
kind of
are,
important.
yeah. So, what our conversation is driving into that analysis before,
Oh,
digging
yes.
into the actual product development, right? We need to do a complete analysis that where we are investing and how we are investing, which people needs to be involved in it. So these are the things that require, this is the analysis stage that needs to be done before actually digging into the development phase, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, in product thinking, we call this the problem space. So that is basically broken down into 4 steps, and we can maybe talk through those and then dig into the next stage if you'd like. So the first one is, and I love this. There's the VP of product design at Facebook has this statement, and I was watching a video of hers where she was saying like the first step is this a real human problem? Because sometimes it's the problem that we've invented in our mind, but it doesn't actually affect people, right? Maybe it's like we're gonna enhance the system, but it's like, well, why is there an actual user benefit? So is it a real human problem? And then how can we prove it?
Yeah.
So that's where the data research, the market research,
Effects and
under
fears, right?
yes, exactly, that you were describing. That's where that comes in to make sure that we can prove that we're really we're not kind of chasing a ghost in a way, right? That there's something real there that needs to be solved. And then I think the one that goes along with that, right along with that is, okay, there's a problem, but should we be the ones to solve it? So does it align with
Yeah.
what we're good at, with our strengths or our mission, our vision? Does it kind of align? I think that's important too.
Very right, very right. So we are, kind of we get into something and we do not just start, working on it. We need to see that how we should work on it and either we should work on it or not, right? So
Yes.
this is what you are saying that if this is not a real world problem, then why we are capturing it? This is how we should
Yeah.
approach it. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is commonly referred to as a lab. So I think the problem space kind of resides within a lab environment potentially, depending on your organizational structure. But this work could be done with a small team. I mean, it could be like 2 to 6 people. Like Jeff Bezos is the pizza team. Team you can feed with one pizza, right? A smaller team. You can have some UX researchers in there, some product designers in there, definitely. Maybe somebody, like a scrum master or a project manager, and potentially a coder if you're building out a prototype. So number one is, is it a human problem? Number two, does it align with our core strengths and mission? Number three is, who is the tribe that is interested in this solution? Whose problem are we solving? And how are they being served in the market today? And so I love that book, Blue Ocean Shift. And so it was talking about how there's some markets that are red oceans where they're full of sharks and it's very dangerous and it's very competitive and it's hard to get into. And then there's blue oceans, and sometimes we have to look to a different market of user, and sometimes we have to change our product to fit that market. And so it's important to be flexible at this stage. I think it's important. And then the last one is, how do we design an experience that's 10x, just better solution, something that's really remarkable.
Yeah. So here comes, the process that how we are going to, create an experience which is worthy of the whole investment of, time and people and money. So we
Yes.
need to come up with a solution. The end product should be something which is acceptable in the market, which is useful for the users. And we need to go in shifts, right? We need to create something, test and iterate, and then come back
Yes.
and then create. It's not like that we create something and we say that this is the best solution. No, this is not going to happen. So we need to, come up with small chunks and then test and iterate things and take feedback from real users. So this is where, we involve users, and the testing with users is always, best in at the stage when you are going to invest in something, the development cost. So before actually investing in development cost, what you can do is you can have your users and test your product with it, and then you will have the real actual data and feedback. And once you have incorporated that, then you will definitely be coming up with a solution which is acceptable in the market, right?
Absolutely. And I think, as we're thinking about shifting from the problem space to the solution space, we better have all of what you just described wrapped up. So we need actual proof that we're providing value, and that's with real users, validated users, not just a user persona that we made up.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because
And then yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying that before, the problem space was the one in which we were before, and now once we are creating a solution and we are in solution space, we cannot only rely on the personas. We have to involve the actual users, which will add value to it.
Absolutely. And I think from that, when I've seen this work best, it kind of started, it started with user research. Then there was some sort of prototype that was iterated over. That gave us, a confirmation that yes, this is an actual viable problem that real people are having, and we have a way of solving it, and we should solve it, and it fits into our wheelhouse, all of those things. But then building a product charter, which is kind of a little bit of a heavier document, usually created by a product manager, or maybe even just a product brief, which is just like a one pager. It's easier to build that and to write that and have everybody on the same page when it comes to like product designers, product management engineers, if we have a prototype. Because if we build that product charter off of a prototype, we have a general clarity around how it's going to work, maybe what technologies might need to be involved, all of that. And so it really gives us kind of one step up. Plus, when the product charter is there, if the business says, well, I can't really imagine this just from this document, I need to see something, you can show the prototype. If they say, well, okay, I see the prototype and I hear the details, but I want to see that this is really solving a problem, well, then you can bring the user experience data and maybe some user interviews or some surveys. And so you have kind of this trifecta of different perspectives to look at this thing from. So now it's turned from a rough idea into kind of a diamond, and you're polishing it every step of the way. And now you can look at it in different facets.
Yeah. And eventually the end result will be, something which is solving the problem, the actual problem which we were tracking from the start.
Yeah. And so the first one is, garner buy-in. You take it and you pitch it to the business. Usually this is, with cross-functional peers in product management and engineering. So we're not an island in of ourselves from the design perspective. So we go to business and we pitch them, and either they say, yes, we can offer these resources, we want to pursue this idea, or maybe you just move on to the next one. And that's the beauty of the lab, is you're kind of bringing in ideas, you're churning through them quickly and cost effectively. And then the ones that get approved really deserve to move forward and to have a larger investment pool. When you're talking about lots of engineers, that's a lot more cost. That's a lot more time.
Exactly. That's why I was saying that before, actually investing in development cost, you need to be sure about your idea. You need to be sure about the roadmap of the product, that how you're going to enroll in the market, how you are going to tackle people, how you are targeting, and who is going to be your first target, how you are marketing your product. So these are, all the considerable points that you need to work on before actually, going into the development phase of the product, right? Which is eventually the end part, right? After that, we need to enroll it into the market with the users. So what do you think about the marketing of a product? How you see it, like being a product designer, how you see it, that how much a marketing strategy affects the product and its usability?
That's a great question. I think it really does. And I think, there's lots of different approaches to marketing. It's a very broad topic, but what's most effective nowadays is social media marketing, and then email marketing, and then paid search. So, and then there's different approaches too, within that space. So I think, when it comes to social media, it's really important to find a way. You have to have a content strategy by which you can post early and often. And I think the most effective campaigns kind of let partners peer behind the curtain and take in their feedback early on in the process. So if you're building, for instance, I'm building a design system. So on Instagram, I'm showing the behind the scenes of like screens as I design them, and I'm getting feedback like in real time. So I don't release a product again that doesn't have market fit. I'm getting feedback along the way. And so I think great marketing does that as well. It involves like if you're launching a social product, maybe it's involving the community and getting their feedback and thoughts and ideas. It's making them part of a journey, and they want to see that journey. They want to be a part of the solution along with you, I think.
Yeah. What I believe is that these days our audience, our market is very intelligent. They are, more interested rather than only, getting the end results. They are more interested in knowing the whole journey, the process, and how this came into, the existence, right? So they are more interested in that as well. So this is how I see it, that the audience is very intelligent, and we need to
Yes.
be, with them. We need to communicate with them. We need to interact with them before, creating something for them. So we have an idea that we are in a journey, and if we are engaging our users and our customers from the start, so they'll have an idea that something is coming up. So they'll be prepared about it maybe, and they will be more open with the feedbacks. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we are specifically like, millennials and Gen Y were the most marketed to generation ever. And so I think what you're saying, absolutely, yeah, I can bear that out from my own opinion and opinions of my friends. I think like we have a good sense of buzz versus kind of reality and ability to pick up on a kind of fake hype and not really draw into that. So yeah, I agree. I think authenticity is really important.
By the way, John, what do you think that a product designer's thinking evolved with the stages the startup is having? So, for instance, you are working in a startup and you are creating a product, right? And the startup is not in a good stage, maybe. So, how do you think that this evolves your thinking on your product?
Yeah, I mean, as the product matures, your understanding of execution changes. And so, what you create as an initial prototype is never the finished product, right? You do have to shift a little bit. And I think that's both a blessing and a curse. That's why it's important to think about proper planning. This is why product management and even design management and design road mapping is so important. And I've heard of this new theory, which I thought was really interesting. It's like laying out heuristics. So certain guideposts at the very beginning. So thinking about, I think this is important too. And I know a lot of design leaders talk about this. You should define the success criteria before you start building, because once you start building, it's like driving a ship into a foggy harbor. It's hard to see what's really going on in kind of the fog of war as you're like moving forward with the product. And so I think thinking about like, hey, this product is going to do X for the user, it's going to do Y for the user, and setting that out. It might be a little bit blurry, it might be a little bit shifty, but you won't sway too far from what the user actually wants. And so but yeah, I mean, being flexible is important. When engineering comes and says, hey, we can't do X, Y, and Z because this data is legacy data, or this system, hasn't been incorporated. I think it's important for us as designers to be a little bit realistic and to understand kind of working with engineers. And I have a little bit of an engineering background. I've actually worked as an engineer before. And so I can kind of empathize with where they're coming from to a certain extent. And I think that's, it's important to think about that as you're moving forward, to be flexible and to work with all your peers.
Definitely. Because we are in an industry where we are not, we cannot be a jack of all trades, right? We need little different heroes with us. We need engineers, we need the marketers, right? So it's a collaborative kind of industry where we are working these days, right? So we cannot say that if we have created something and it's the best solution, so no one can comment. Engineering can come up, engineering may have their own problems they are facing. So we need to tackle those as well, right? This should be a collaborative. This should be a collaborative one.
Absolutely. And there's a couple other things actually that I'd like to add, and that's that as you're a designer kind of going through the process, I think it's important to think about a product first and features second, because a lot of times a product can get chopped into literally a million pieces. You might have thousands of items in a backlog.
Yeah.
And if items are arbitrarily getting pulled out, at the end, you ship like a Frankenstein product. You don't really ship something that's valuable to the user. And there's this idea of shipping a skateboard and then a scooter and then a car, right? So it's always in working order. And that's great. But in some cases, like if you're Tesla, your market might not want a skateboard or a scooter. Maybe they only want the car. And so I think thinking about products first and how that product experience is going to work all the way through the process will enable you to sort of push back in certain ways to make sure that at the end of the day, you're shipping a complete product that isn't missing certain really important, pain-solving features, for instance.
Right. So I see it in a way that we need to see the bigger picture and then consolidate the idea, consolidate the features, and work on each of the item step by step. Right. We cannot sit in, we cannot only start defining the feature list and start working on it. It's not like that. The overall picture should be clear before actually working on the idea. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then I think, probably the next step is to define the technology. So once you kind of have the product prototyped, you've gone through the research phase, you've kind of planned it with the jobs to be done, and you're taking thin slices. So a little bit of front end, a little bit of, middleware, a little bit of API work, and kind of working in kind of like if you were to cut a cake, you've got those thin slices of all three layers. Now you can define your technology because you know what you're actually building. So now you can let your engineers go and spike on, okay, we should use Twilio for this, notification feature or whatever, are we going to pick Azure or Google Cloud or, AWS? Like that's kind of the time to do it because you can correctly evaluate what you're really doing and you have clarity and you have approval. So you know that the budget's going to be there. You're not just wasting money. Like you said, before investing all of this time and money.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that it's a very important point that you need to consider the technologies you are going to use for building the actual product. Right. Very right.
Yes. Yeah.
And lastly, let's talk about what are some tips for developing consistent visual direction for cross-platform experience. So I have seen designers working on some amazing products, right? They have a lot of things to work on, and eventually what happens is the overall consistency is missing in the overall product they are working in. Maybe it's a product which has different product lines, like it has app, it has web system, and maybe a couple of other things as well. But what I feel is that somehow the team has missed the consistency thing, and which is I believe is being a design team and focusing on a product is a lacking point. How you see it?
Absolutely, 100%. That's a major pain point when it comes to design and starting to scale design. As you mentioned, when you get multiple products, multiple product lines, kind of the fracturing that can happen visually is a real problem. And we know it's a real problem in UX. It's called omni-channel. So it has an actual name, and that's if you get a text or you get an email or you go on the native app or you go on the web app, does it all feel like one company?
Yeah.
Is it all speaking in one language? So like UX writing comes into play, how the visuals are presented. It's a major problem. Yeah. Absolutely.
And how you are utilizing the branding of the company and the product, and how you are. I believe that this is something that you are creating a visual, representation of that product, right? So either it's the product itself or the marketing or the emails you are going to send to your customers, right? It should all be aligned. It should look similar and relatable. So let's consider, myself a user. So if I am looking at something, an ad on my phone, and then I go to my laptop, I'm working, and I receive an email, and it's the same, same people who are approaching me. So I can relate with the visuals. Visual memory is more something which we remember more than something which is not visually clear. So this is
Definitely.
how I feel that while working on a product or product line, we should focus on creating its design system, um, very smart one that it could be utilized for the product lines, for marketing, and for everything which is coming up related to that product, right?
Absolutely. I think back in the day of print, we had style guides and brand books, and that was enough, right? Because you were putting your advertisements maybe on a TV commercial or maybe on a billboard and in a magazine, and that was about it, right? We didn't have the technologies of computing and personal computers and all of the fracturing of devices that we have nowadays. And so I think the rise of design systems was just kind of solving a need that had become very painful in a lot of different companies, environments. Is we need a way to track what the iOS app looks like, what the Android app looks like, what is, maybe you're building React on the web. And so style guides weren't simply enough. And also engineers were being blocked. I think as a designer, as you go through the maturity of a product and you're nearing kind of like that shipping phase where you're constantly iterating, you're mainly putting out fires. And a lot of times you're solving developers blockers. They're coming to you and saying, hey, I need this icon. Hey, what does this font look like? Hey, this and that. And so a design system allows you as a designer to kind of multiply your time. And it's a lever by which you can design once and then share everywhere. And so design systems, like I said, they can be hosted on the company's intranet, so it makes it easy for everyone to know what to expect. And then a lot of companies are making these public. So like Bootstrap was a very, very early component library, which was created by Twitter, by some folks at Twitter. Now we have, Asana has one, and we have ones by Salesforce and so many different ones. IBM, I think they have their own, and Microsoft and all of them. And they're making them public, which is great because a lot of times, like especially as a B2B company, say you're Salesforce and you have all these other businesses incorporating your business's technology, you want that to remain consistent. So, using the logo in a brochure is not the use case anymore. Now they're building an app with all these components, so they want it to be consistent. So they have to build a component library around that.
Yeah, exactly. And then they need to make it public as well, as you are, mentioning that a lot of big companies are doing it. And, they are providing the space that, okay, this is something we want our product to look like, and you need to follow it, right? So you have
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And then, so I've built 3 design systems, and the first one was HTML, which was, fine. And then we shifted to kind of Angular and then quickly to React. And so HTML no longer did it anymore because it was architected in such a different way. And so from then on, the second version was basically in React, but it was in a way kind of hard coded with the styling and the theming. You weren't able to really adapt it to different products in a different visual way. And also we ran into like CSS naming conflicts where things would be named similar class names. And so you'd have these weird stylistic overwrites that you have to go hunt down. And then the third one was, again, with React, but we incorporated a CSS in JavaScript technology called Emotion. And what that allowed us to do is have these components that a developer could bring in, but then in the heart of their project, they could put a JSON object, basically a JavaScript object, and they could define their fonts, their color palette, everything that is custom to their brand, basically their style parameters. And those parameters could go into the components and override everything. So now you could have a business, say Microsoft, who has Excel over here and Word over here, and maybe a chat application. And it could be using all the same components, but they could be stylized in a completely separate manner. So you wouldn't even know it's the same code, but you're getting the accessibility benefits, the performance benefits, the security benefits of them being hardened, and much, much lower maintenance costs because you've got, a much smaller subset of code versus just, 1,000 buttons. Basically, they're similar code, but they're having to be recreated by tons of engineers. and then there's design fracturing and try to keeping it consistent. It's a nightmare. So
Mm.
that's some of the technology that exists now with like Storybook and Emotion that didn't even exist in a short while ago. Pretty exciting.
Very nice, very exciting as well, because it will make our life more easier. You know, when the product is in the development phase, sometimes designer feel uncomfortable, you know, dealing with engineers and, you know, being in their language. It's a kind of a difference. So this is a little bit, I can say, I always relate it to in this way, that engineers and designers, they both work side by side, but they have difference of opinions.
Definitely.
Even we need to respect them.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
right. So, all right, John, it was very nice talking to you. See you on our next episode soon with another topic, right?
You too. Thank you so much.